to the public tomorrow. This is Glenn Rinker saying goodnight for News 4 Washington and inviting you to stay tuned for an NBC News special on Vietnam.
Produced for WRC-TV Channel 4 by NBC News, which is solely responsible for its content.
Bedtime and brush your teeth.
I don't like those toothpaste you get. Let's play riddles.
Just one. What's red, white, and new?
What?
New Colgate toothpaste.
Go brush. Colgate. The flavor is fresher than ever. It's new. It's improved. Even more important is all the clinical research on anti-cavity Colgate. In test after test, the results confirm Colgate unsurpassed in reducing new cavities when compared to the best-known fluoride. Get anti-cavity Colgate.
Did you think you could get clothes clean in cold water, Mrs. Spears?
No, but Jeff gets into our Georgia red clay and he picks up all sorts of stains, and hot water can set some of them in. So I tried cold power.
And?
Look how clean it gets his pants. I do everything in cold power.
Even diapers?
Sure, I understand it germ-proofs.
You're right. Laboratory tests have shown that cold power germ-proofs and gets out the worst kind of dirt in cold water.
The latest fashions from leading manufacturers are now reduced for the big store-wide midwinter furniture sale. Enjoy big savings now at C.L. Barnes of Virginia. Full color 4.
Hi, this is Johnny Carson. As you know, this is usual starting time for the Tonight Show. And tonight my guest is the New Orleans District Attorney, Mr. Jim Garrison, who is with us to discuss, as he puts it, some new and vital information concerning the Kennedy assassination. But because of the critical war situation in Vietnam, especially around Saigon, NBC for the next 15 minutes is going to bring you a special news program via satellite. So stay with us. We'll return in 15 minutes with our guest, Mr. Garrison.
The following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
NBC News presents Viet Cong Terror, a guerrilla offensive. Now, here is NBC News correspondent Frank McGee.
The new communist campaign in Vietnam continues. Just after midnight their time, a band of Viet Cong raiders blew up a power installation and attacked 2 police stations in Saigon. Other small bands still roam the city. The Viet Cong are reported to be in complete control of a militant Buddhist headquarters less than a mile from the center of town, and there are reports that the National Liberation Front has formed a revolutionary council to run Saigon. At nearby Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, which is also American military headquarters, sporadic sniper fire continues to be heard. At Hue, the old imperial capital, 400 miles to the north, the Viet Cong is holding on to part of the town, as well as half the city of Kon Tum in the central highlands. Along the northern coastline, Nha Trang and Quy Nhon have come under fresh mortar fire. And earlier today, South Vietnamese President Thieu declared martial law. It all amounts to the most ambitious series of communist attacks yet mounted, spreading violence into at least 10 provincial capitals, plus American air bases and civilian installations stretching the entire length of the country. None had greater psychological impact than the assault on the American embassy in Saigon. For a late film report on Vietnam countrywide, here is NBC News correspondent Jack Perkins in Tokyo by satellite.
232 GIs killed and 900 wounded makes one of the heaviest weeks of the Vietnam War. And it is not a week. It is just over 2 days, the past 2 days, 2 of the worst we have known in Vietnam. We have film reports tonight from NBC News correspondents Howard Tuckner, Ron Nesson, and Wilson Hall. Howard Tuckner covered the battle at the embassy.
These are American combat military police and troops from the 101st Airborne Division, half a block from the U.S. Embassy. Viet Cong snipers and suicide commandos were holed up inside the embassy compound and firing from surrounding buildings. The Americans had to move cautiously. About 15 Viet Cong commandos were now on the embassy grounds. They had rushed in under a Viet Cong mortar and rocket attack that scored at least 2 hits on the new $3 million 8-story building. It was opened 2.5 months ago. 2 U.S. Marines who had tried to fire at the Viet Cong through the embassy gate were killed by automatic weapons fire. Every time the Americans tried to move through the embassy yard, the hidden Viet Cong, some of the enemy commandos were killed trying to regroup near the front door of the embassy.
Now CIA men and MPs have gone into the embassy and are trying to get the snipers out by themselves.
The Americans used tear gas, but there were not enough gas masks for the troops who needed them. Of all the Viet Cong terrorist attacks in Saigon in the last 3 years, this was the boldest. Not only had a Viet Cong unit managed to get inside the U.S. Embassy compound, but the terrorists successfully held off an American force for 7 hours. Howard Tuckner, NBC News, Saigon.
While the battle for the embassy was raging, there was heavy fighting also at the presidential palace, the radio station, the Philippine embassy, 4 American billets, and around the Saigon airport. Tan Son Nhut. Wilson Hall was there.
Sniper fire is still coming from some buildings around the American officers' quarters, just across the street from the Joint Chiefs of Command, high-ranking South Vietnamese officers.
The terrorists, after 7 hours of shooting, still had a lot of ammunition left. An MP company held the road between the terrorist stronghold and the Vietnamese headquarters. Terrorists also had enough ammunition to snipe at helicopters and observation planes as they hovered overhead. Civilians who were caught in the crossfire were brought out. No injuries. One Vietnamese was wearing a government uniform, a stolen one. He was one of the terrorist snipers.
We've got another 2 more alert forces that are trying to push him out this way, but he's heavily fortified. He's got a lot of ammo.
What's he got, small arms?
Small arms, automatic fire, grenade launcher, and hand grenades.
You lost any men here?
Well, I've got 6 people I've had wounded.
This outfit was called out of the alleys to rush back to Tan Son Nhut Airport, where reinforcements were needed as the fighting continued there. Wilson Hall, NBC News, Saigon.
And as we said, there were other battles throughout the city of Saigon running simultaneously. at the presidential palace, though President Nguyen Van Thu was not there. He does not live there. Also at the radio station, which the Viet Cong attacked, mortared, set afire, and destroyed, when finally Vice Premier Key had to go on the air to announce a general curfew throughout the city and the imposition of martial law. He had to do it on the American Armed Forces radio station because his own Saigon radio station had been blown to pieces. There were attacks on the Philippine embassy. There were attacks on 4 different American billets. GIs tried to defend them. They moved out, GIs who perhaps had never fought before in Vietnam, clerk typists, cooks, grabbed themselves rifles or machine guns or whatever they could find and moved into the combat. It was not only in Saigon, it was throughout the country, in every major city almost, in provincial capitals. And as it raged, it was apparent that these attacks were very well planned and very well coordinated. They had been laid out for a long time in advance. That was clear, or they couldn't have been pulled off with such skill and timing. And so the question arose, if there was so much planning to them, then did intelligence, American or Vietnamese intelligence, know about them? And if they did, what did they do about them? Do we have the film from Da Nang now? Well, we do not have the film from Da Nang, and we apologize for that. This has been a hectic time, and the film got out of Vietnam very late because the airports have been closed. It is sometimes said that Americans have grown weary of seeing pictures of GIs fighting all over the countryside of Vietnam. They have seen it so much that it has little impact. Well, here then is the Da Nang film we do have. This was the beginning of the series of raids. If the climax was in Saigon, this was the start at the Da Nang Air Base. The Viet Cong came in with mortars. At daylight, rockets, smoke still curled. They did much damage. They did much destruction. Americans like sometimes, perhaps too smugly, to think that at least if we do not control the countryside of Vietnam, as we would like to, we do control our own bases. But this is one of our bases. And for these moments and hours, the Viet Cong controlled it. Jack Perkins, NBC News, Tokyo.
Thank you, Jack. We appreciate that effort. As the Viet Cong mounted attacks down the length of South Vietnam, the massive buildup of North Vietnamese Army regulars continued at Khe Sanh. Thousands of enemy troops are poised, ready to strike at Khe Sanh, the western anchor of the demilitarized zone. The Pentagon is less concerned with the Viet Cong attacks on the cities than with the prospect of a massive onslaught against Khe Sanh. NBC News correspondent Robert Guerilla.
Even the American military must grudgingly admire what the Viet Cong were able to do and what they achieved. The perfectly timed attacks are going to be remembered a lot longer than the less dramatic but hard-fought American victories of late. Pentagon officials believe the Viet Cong paid dearly for their acts of rampant terrorism, but surely the communist leaders must feel they were worth it. They do not appear to be final acts of desperation. Remember, too, not a single North Vietnamese regular was involved. Hanoi's troops are, however, poised near Khe Sanh, and that battle, which could be decisive, has yet to be fought. The U.S. military may now have to rethink basic tactical and strategic concepts in Vietnam. Troops may have to be redeployed. The Americans are painfully weak in many important areas, particularly in the Central Highlands. The communists may not be winning the war, as the Pentagon claims, but they don't seem to be losing it either. Robert Guerilla, NBC News, Washington.
So all in all, we have these sobering facts to consider. The enemy, supposedly confined to the countryside, is clearly capable of attacking cities spread the length of the country. 40, perhaps 50,000 enemy troops are now massed near Khe Sanh. The North Vietnamese have reopened the war in Laos, where it is reported they have an estimated 40,000 troops. Truck traffic on the Ho Chi Minh Trail has risen sharply. One official, disputed by the Pentagon, said there are more targets on the trail than planes to hit them. And combat commanders report enemy troops are receiving more modern, sophisticated weapons, significantly increasing their firepower. Well, what to make of all this? The most hopeful speculation could be that the enemy is mounting some last desperate campaign. Another possibility would be that the North is trying to improve its bargaining position before entering any negotiations. Most ominously, this could mark the beginning of a new, far more hazardous phase of the war. And there remains the official explanation. that it's all an attempt to divert American forces from Khe Sanh. But officials have a poor record of interpreting this war. It will be difficult now, even more, to believe the United States has been doing as well as these officials have said. Now standing by in Washington is NBC White House correspondent Ray Scherer.
Congressmen and the people, too, are beginning to show signs of restiveness over what happened to the United States Embassy in Saigon. The question being asked is, if the United States had advance information the communists would strike during the truce period, why no more guards around the embassy? The White House answer is yes, we did have advance word on expected terrorist activity, but we had no information on where the Viet Cong would strike. The word at the White House today was, you cannot prevent commando-type raids. Saigon is an open city. The fact that all the intruders were killed demonstrates there was no slackness. In sum, the president senses trouble ahead on the political front over administration stewardship of the armed forces and has begun a public relations effort to head off that trouble. Ray Scherer, NBC White House correspondent.
And Frank McGee, NBC News. Good evening.
This has been a presentation of NBC News, which is solely responsible for its content. Stay tuned for The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson with his special guest, Jim Garrison.